Doug Zoy here once again, and today's video actually I started about 2 months ago and I never got it finished. And meanwhile, some discussions came up on the Do-It-Yourself Solar Forum, and I thought, well, they're kind of relevant. So, this video here is going to be about top balancing 12-volt batteries with dumb BMSs. I have two 12-volt batteries, lithium iron phosphate, in my boat for trolling, and I top balance them about once a year. And this is the method I use. And then I have another one I use with a 1200 watt inverter. Same deal. I'll top balance it here about once a year. I can't read cell voltages, but I do know I can get a top balance. Now, if you're using a 12-volt battery with a dumb BMS, can't read cell voltages, and you're suffering from reduced capacity, the reason why is because your cells are imbalanced. Your battery is only going to have the capacity of the lowest capacity cell. And some of this discussion that we were discussing here on the Do-It-Yourself Solar Forum, some of these members are not charging their batteries to a high enough voltage where balancing will occur and cell capacity, full cell capacity, is not being reached. So, and here's another one. If you're using 12-volt batteries in series to make 48 volts, this video here also applies even if you could read cell voltages. You want to get those batteries all in balance. So the way you would do that, if you were using 4 12-volt batteries to make 48 volts, is you'd break them down, put them all in parallel, and then use your power supply to get that balance back up there and get that capacity restored. So let's get started. If you like what you see here, hit the like and subscribe button, share this video, and let's get started. So we got here is a Power Queen 100 amp hour battery. It's a cheapie. It doesn't have Bluetooth communication, so it's a dumb BMS, but it worked for what I need to use it for. I use it with a 1200 watt inverter I have. Currently the battery voltage is 13.31 volts, and I'll here show the power supply and make sure that that reads correctly when we put our settings in it. All right, I got my power supply set at 13.60 volts, and I have it turned on, and it puts out 13.57 volts. Of course, that's, open circuit voltage, but it's close enough. And we know that the power supply, the voltage reading is about the same. Now, the reason we're going to go with 13.6 volts is we're going to put 3.4 volts is what we're going to charge each cell to, supposedly. All right, and then we're going to continue on. So let's get started. After about 10 takes here, we'll get started. I got it set at 13.60 volts, and the idea there is we want to get to a point where the cells start, the BMS will start balancing cells here. So at 3.4 volts, which I don't know if this BMS and this battery starts balancing at 3.4 volts or if it's higher, but that's where we're going to start. It's at 10 amps, and actually I've done a couple takes here, and so, it's going to drop pretty fast when I turn it on, but, we can see it's dropping. So, we're going to charge it here to supposedly 3.4 volts per cell, but we have no idea what the cell voltages actually are. The idea is here we want to top balance all the cells and get them up to full capacity and let the balancer have time to do its job. All right, I'll be back later. So it's been 45 minutes, and basically we're charging here at about 1 amp, but even though that's set at 13.60 volts, at the battery terminals, we're only reading 13.56. So that brings up the other thing, people will set their charge controller to, let's say, 13.60 volts, for 12-volt battery, or basically 3.40 volts per cell. And the issue you run into, of course, is you have some voltage drop in your cabling or your wiring or whatever. So actually what's at the battery is only, in this case, 13.56. So the cells basically are going to be under 3.40 volts. So, that creates the first problem, Second of all, some of these cells may be over 3.4 volts and some will be below 3.4 volts. So, what we're doing here is we're slowly charging it up, and we're letting that balancer have time to bring those cells that might be over 3.40 volts, and get that delta closed up between the low cells, So basically that's all we're doing here is we're just slowly charging it. But part of this is to show that good balance here will be done at above 3.45 volts. So anyway, let's continue on, and we'll see how long it's going to take. So it's been just over an hour, and we're starting to drop here under 4 watts. So Basically, yep, my battery voltage still is at 13.57 here at the end of my lead. So what we're going to do is we're going to bump her on up to 13.8, and you can see them amps really climb, Now, the issue you run into is, even at 13.6 volts, you could still have some cells, you could have a cell at 3.42 volts and one is at 3.38 volts, and one at 3.39 volts and one at 3.41 volts. The idea is that we need to get up into that charging curve here on the upper knee area. And what we want is, we want to get those capacity of those cells, we want to get them filled up because, you want a top balancer at the top, so yeah, it's, drawing 5 amps, so I'll be back later. We'll see where we're at. So while we're at it here, we're going to talk about a few things here. A 12-volt battery here like this, is probably composed of 4 prismatic cells, and, each cell can be at varying capacity, so let's say it's a 100 amp hour battery. Well, you could have some cells, that are at 100 amp hours and some cells that are 102 amp hours and some cells will be 104 amp hours or whatever. And when you're charging them, and if you look at it, if you have Bluetooth connection, or you have a balancer on with a display or whatever, those cells that are at a lower voltage usually are charged at less capacity. They're at a lower state of charge, okay? And it takes time to fill that up. Now, one member thought, hey, it's like a bucket, and you're just running water on over it, and the lower buckets will take on more water than the fuller buckets. No, it don't work that way. So another one thought, it's like a sponge, and a drier sponge will absorb more than a wetter sponge. No, it don't work that way. All the current has to go through all the cells at the same time. The same current will pass through all of them because they're all in series. So, the only way you can balance them is you have to either pull power off the top of the high cells and bleed it off with, let's say, a resistor, or you pull it off, like in a case of a balancing BMS, you pull it off, it goes in a capacitor, and then it's discharged into a lower cell. That's the only way you can do it. There's no other way. Thinking that you're going to fill a battery cell up by just passing current through it, and it's going to fill up faster than the other cells when all the current has to pass through all 4 cells. It ain't going to work that way. All right, later. Okay, it's been another 25 minutes, so, we're at a total time here of 1 hour and 25 minutes. Every now and then you'll see the amps drop to 0, watts drop to 0, we're sitting at 13.8 volts there, but really at the battery we're at 13.77. I didn't do the math, I know we're getting close to 3.45 volts per cell. So what we're going to do now is we're going to bump her on up to 14 volts, and we'll be back later. So it's been another 15 minutes here, and yeah, power supply's at 14 volts, but our voltage here is at 13.97. So, we know we're not quite at 3.5 volts. Haven't seen any zeros yet, but just wanted to cover a few things here. This is about charging really slow with an absorption. And the idea here is we keep our voltage down low and our current down low so that any runner cells won't run up to 3.65 volts and hit an over voltage protection and quit charging. As long as we know that it's still taking current, we know that we have not had any cell hit over voltage protection. All right. So, it's been running here. What's it been now? I'd have to even look, but I think it's 1 hour and 45 minutes, but I haven't seen any zeros pop through here yet. So, I know it's not it, but it's getting late, and I'll probably end up finishing this tomorrow, and we'll see how long it takes, and then we're going to see what our resting voltage is when I'm done. And I'm actually going to run this up to 3.65 volts. What the heck, All right, later. So it's the next morning here, and the battery's been sitting here all night, and the resting voltage here is 13.87. So, it's over 3.5 volts per cell. Basically, it's fully charged here at that voltage, but we're going to keep going. So we're going to kick her on and see what we get. As you can see, the voltage here is still, like 3 amps, and I didn't change anything because we were at 14 volts when I quit last night. So we'll let it run a while and we'll see what we get. So it's been 10 minutes here. Battery voltage here is sitting at 13.97, and our amp draw is basically got down to almost zero, but we're still taking. So we're gonna bump her on up here, another 0.2 of a volt, and let her run some more. Be back later. So it's been another 10 minutes actually here, and yeah, we're still seeing about 1.75 watts going into the battery. At 3.5 volts per cell and a half amp of balancing, that basically is 1.75 watts. Would be your balance current. That it's pulling off your top cells. So usually this is the spot where I usually stop here at 14.2 volts because I'm above 3.5 volts here on my per cell. But and what I'll do is I'll run it right on down to basically just let it run until it's drawn absolutely nothing. Then I know that all my cells here are balanced at just above 3.5 volts. So I'm going to let it run here, and then we'll see how long it takes, and then I'll bump it on up to the next step. So it's actually been 15 minutes here. So as you can see, my current going in there is less than 1.75 watts. And basically, if you're under 1.75 watts, your balance current is going to be 1.75 watts per cell. So, we know that basically we are very close on the balance, and we're still taking current. So we know we're not hitting over voltage protection. And this way the cells that are charged with a lower state of charge are still getting a little bit of current. So I'm going to bump it up here to 14.4, and we'll keep going. So here we are at 14.4 volts, and as you can see, basically we have hit over voltage protection. So if I kick it off, kick it back on, it'll draw just for that little bit. So I'm basically going to back it back down to 14.2 and let it run for a bit and let it balance some more. All right, later. So I backed it down to 14.2 volts, and basically we're done. It's not going to take any more energy here. As long as you know that your balance current is, like 1.75 watts, you know that if you're putting in more than 1.75 watts, that extra current is going to other cells. So once it starts dropping below 1.75 watts, you figure passive balancer is probably in any of these cheap batteries. So, it's going to be about a half an amp, and that's 1.75 watts. So, once you hit that point, you're basically done, and if you were to test this battery, it should test close to 100 amp hours, or above. So, but yeah, if you're running into problems, where like, you used to be able to run for, a day or so, off your battery, but now you're down to half a day. Well, what you got is you got a bunch of unbalanced cells, and you need to balance them. And this is one way of doing it, I don't know another way to, the other choice you have is you have to really limit the current going in there and slowly bring your voltage up. And you can do it with a charge controller. You'll have to set it down to like 13.8 volts, and then limit your current going in. So that way it gives you time for your BMS balancing to take place, and it can keep any cells from hitting over voltage protection. So I let it sit here. Actually, I started out, it was 13.61 volts here settled, and I started up again. I just wanted to double make sure that, I get them cells balanced. So I'm just letting her run. She was charging at 10 amps, but I don't think it'll take long, and we'll be down to about nothing. But we'll check it out, see what happens. Oh, it's been running here, 25 minutes here, and yeah, it's getting down there, but there must be some balancing going in and getting those rest of those cells all up to the same level. So just keep letting her run a little bit longer, and we'll see where it ends. So it's been about 45 minutes, and you can see, it's just barely taking anything. So, I'm going to consider this one done. We're at about 3.55 volts per cell. That's usually what I do use when I'm doing initial balance on a battery pack. My normal charging voltage is 3.45 to 3.50 volts per cell. I used to charge my house bank, under, I had some runners in there, and I would keep it below 3.45 volts per cell, but above 3.4, and try and balance it. And I just seemed like the balancer ran all the time, just all kinds of problems. So in the end, I finally bumped my voltage up between to like 3.45 volts per cell, my charging voltage, or just above it. And I noticed that it didn't have as much balancing going on and this and that, and it seemed to hold balance better. And in the end, I actually went up to 3.5 volts, and that has worked out really well. So I've been pretty happy with that. So don't be afraid to try and experiment and find out what works for your pack. Everybody's kind of a little bit different, on their setups, so you might be able to charge faster or slower than somebody else. So, but if you need to really get an imbalance gone, the best way to do it here is to use a power supply or turn your charge controller charging voltage way down and keep your current down and let the balancer have time to do its job. Not such a big thing, if you use an active balancer, but still, you might need it. And I'm seeing guys out there now with 4 amp active balancers, and I'm thinking to myself, man, you must have some really crappy cells, Buy some good cells and you won't have them problems. On these cheapy batteries like this Power Queen, just do it this way, and I think you'll find that, your capacity will stay up there. And a lot of people think their batteries are junk, but really all it is their cells are out of balance, and just a good balanced charge, and it'll bring it right back up to capacity. So, that shows that, if you keep your charge voltage, between that 3.45 to 3.5 volts, and keep your current down, using a power supply or your charge controller, that, over time you'll get those cells balanced, and bring back that capacity. Now, I do these here about once a year, but, they don't see very much use. 2 of them are for my boat. The Power Queen is just used intermittently whenever. And I also do that one about once a year. Now, if you're running a bunch of batteries in series to make 24 volts or 48 volts, yeah, you're probably going to want to do it more often. You might have to do it every 2 or 3 months, and then break them down, put them in parallel, and then get them all charged up together is the best way. So that pretty well concludes it for this video. I do have more content coming here. I'm working on some array stuff, and, hopefully I have more time to make some more videos and get them posted up. So, anyway, thanks for watching. Catch some rays, and we'll see you next time.